good. She can hear you actually.
Oh, great.
His Excellency is saying hi. Yeah.
Good morning, Excellency.
She knows you as Uncle Nasir. So when I said His Excellency, she's
yeah, a little strange. Yes.
Excellent.
Bring those. Yeah, those ones. No, those. Yeah. No, I want the screen to be. I'm trying to get the.
Yes, please take your time, sir.
This Zoom has it on. It's a method to the madness, otherwise.
All right.
I think this is better.
All right.
MSK, welcome.
Good morning, ma. Thank you so much.
Morning. His
Good morning,
Excellency is here. Sheikh is here.
Good morning, Sheikh.
How are you?
Nakwana, Excellency.
Yeah, live here, please, no excellency.
Malam.
You cannot say Nasir. Malam is fine.
Okay, sir. Good morning, Malam.
Wait, yeah, well, thank you. When we finish the job and we've done excellently well, you can call me excellency. By then, you will not call me excellency because I'm no longer governor.
Good to hear. It's 11 o'clock exactly, but we know that we had about 800 or more people who registered to participate, and they're all coming in gradually. We're almost, the numbers keep counting down. And I'm sure our colleagues in the back end are also sending out reminders and notifying people that we're ready to start.
We can wait a few more minutes. Let's get as many people on board as possible.
I think so, Malam. We're almost hitting 300. We'll see how it goes.
Oh, good.
And of course, it's also going to be streaming live on Facebook anyway, so we have to also add that number. Yes, welcome participants. You will be automatically muted as you're joining. And I'd also like to ask if the IT team has not switched off your camera, to ask you to please do so, except you are a panelist. Welcome and good day to you all. Yes, I hear what you say. We will start shortly in the next 5 minutes or so. We just thought to give a bit more time because that number is rapidly growing and sometimes technology can be a bear. So we have to be a bit more kind and just allow 5 minutes. But I can assure you we'll make up for any time lost. Thank you for waiting patiently. Thank you. And thank you for joining us. The webinar is now streaming live on Facebook.
All right.
Alaikum assalam, welcome. Yes, lots of people have a lot of questions. We're going to set the ground rules the moment we kick off. Welcome.
Hi.
Excellent, very active participation. The chat box is busting. 80 chats already, interesting. Yes, you can restream and reshare the live stream. You can tweet and retweet. That's quite allowed. This is a public space. You're free to do so. Welcome, yes, good morning. Good afternoon. That might be someone from the UAE, I think. It's good afternoon now there, I'm sure. Please remember it is live on Facebook. So you can also ask other colleagues who are active on Facebook to join this conversation today. Thank you all for joining quite early. We just thought to give a few more minutes, about 2-3 more minutes now, because I said 5 minutes 2 minutes ago, to have as many colleagues as can to join us, because sometimes technology can get in the way of the conversation. We're almost hitting 400 now. We had about 800 people register for this conversation this morning. The questions are going to be text-based. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a box, a Q&A box. You can type in your question there. We're unfortunately not able to take voice questions because there's so many people participating. I will not be able to do justice to everyone, therefore, if we had a voice question and answer process. So the question will be text-based and the answer will be voiced. Thank you, friends, for joining us. Excellent. In 1 minute, we will be kicking off. Thank you for joining us. Glad you could come as well. Welcome, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Wa alaikum assalam. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. What time is it now? Okay. It is 11 past. We really must commence now. Otherwise, it will not be fair to those who joined early, including our resource persons. So we are going to kick off. Dear friends, good morning. Welcome to this webinar conversation on the future of Almajiri children in a post-COVID-19 world, convened by the Almajiri Child Rights Initiative, Akri, very ably supported by UNICEF, the Center for Information Technology, CTAD, and the MacArthur Foundation. My name is Amina Salihu, and I have the honor to moderate this very important conversation today. As many of us would know, especially those of us in Nigeria, today is Children's Day in Nigeria. But are all children given equal rights to thrive, to enjoy protection, education, nutrition, shelter, and dignity, or health? If the answer were yes, we would not be having this conversation today. We know, for example, that over 10.5 million children are out of school in Nigeria, and majority of those children are in northern Nigeria. The north of Nigeria, indeed Nigeria, and the entire sub-region is hemorrhaging, or hemorrhaging by ignoring the vulnerabilities experienced by children, especially in the context of today's conversation, children under the Almajiri system. And today, we seek greater critical understanding. We want to understand the concept of Al-Majiranchi. We want to understand what drives this norm and what are its parallels. We see the COVID-19 as a policy window to begin to ask ourselves key questions and to think about sustainable strategies. I know a lot of us have come with passion to this meeting, and that is an excellent resource to have. Some of us have already sent in our questions. Some of us actually joined way before time, and that is all very excellent. We're very happy to have you here. But our goal is to listen with an open mind and to be very solution-oriented and driven. And that will be the very first ground rule that I'm going to put on the table today. To say that, please come to this conversation with your solutions, with your critical thoughts, with your passion leading you. Remember that this conversation is not just on Zoom, it's also on Facebook. You can tweet and retweet and share across multi-platforms. We had over 800 people register for this conversation, and that is only those who registered. We're not even counting those who might be joining on Facebook or elsewhere. Please note that we are recording. It's your right to know that we are recording this conversation as a privacy data rights issue. There will be a brief evaluation at the end of the conversation where you get a chance to tell us a few thoughts about what you have listened to today. Please do avail yourself the opportunity of that evaluation. We have people from all over the world, so I can only say welcome, friends, because it's good morning Nigeria, could be good evening somewhere else, or good afternoon somewhere else. Permit me to quickly and formally introduce our panel today. We have a very distinguished panel of great citizens and friends of Nigeria, thought leaders, activators of ideas, protectors of children, and duty bearers, whose reputation actually precedes them. And I'm sure some of them are the reason why you have joined this conversation today. We have a father, an author, a technocrat, politician, and governor of Kaduna State, northwest of Nigeria. A few months ago, the governor sent one of his sons to a public school in Kaduna State to demonstrate leadership and the power of possibility. Malam Nasir El-Rufai has joined us this morning. The Director of Research and Training, Dawa Institute of Nigeria, Dean, Sheikh Nurudeen, whom I know very well to be working with a coalition of organizations across faith to really understand the greater good and the greater community pathway. He's also the chair of the Board of Trustees of Almajiri Child Rights Initiative. His department is a very fundamental part of the Islamic Education Trust. I was reminding him this morning that some of us in secondary school actually lived and thrived on literature from IET. Young Muslim, anyone who did IRK in school would have known Young Muslim at the time when we went to school. And I'm 50 years and counting, so that gives you an idea of when I went to secondary school. Sheikh Nurudeen Lemu has joined us this morning. A friend of children who likes to see outcomes delivered for children, a global protector of children. We have the UNICEF country representative here today, Peter Hawkins. Thank you for the support to this conversation. Now, I have also on the panel a passionate campaigner and mobilizer, He wants to see promises. He wants to see services delivered for children, you know, not just the usual run-of-the-mill advocacy. He's a proud product of a public school like myself. I went to Gida and he went to Federal Government College, Kefi. He is the founder of the Almajiri Child Rights Initiative and the assistant PRO of the Unity School Old Students Association. Mohammed Keana, MSK, thank you for joining us this morning. Distinguished participants, we're going to be having some guest contributors, and as they come, we will be introducing them. I'm very happy that the former Deputy Governor for Plateau State and now the Honorable Minister for Women Affairs, Pauline Tallinn, has agreed to join us as a contributor at some point, and some members of the diplomatic corps as well, and we're going to keep you posted. So, welcome friends. You have heard the ground rules, you have heard and met the panelists, and now we have to kick off. And before we do remember that the questions today will be written, so you can type in your questions in the chat box. Some colleagues also front-loaded their questions ahead of today, and we will be taking as many of these questions as we can, and most probably clustering them thematically so that we can focus on looking at solutions and ideas that are enduring and can take us forward on this issue. Thank you and welcome. Sheikh Lemu, I would like to ask you to open with a few words of remarks, 3 minutes actually, your opening remarks. And in those remarks, to help us ground this conversation by sharing with us some kind of philosophical understanding. What is Al-Majiranchi? Is it a new norm? Is it an old norm? We know it's been around for centuries, for over 300 years. What is it that drives a parent to send their child to go learn under a scholar? Is it the same as sending a child to a boarding school to learn under an educational system? Is there a parallel? Is there a difference? What are those parallels? What are those differences? Give us a philosophical underpinning as you share your opening remarks. Yeah, Sheikh, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and it's an honor and privilege to have this opportunity. I'll go straight into contributing in that there's not what you call an answer to the problem, but I think, or even the understanding, but different pieces of the puzzle. In every society, so pick a country, Turkey, Ethiopia, Argentina, Indonesia, China, France, etc. The lowest quality of education is usually in the most rural areas because the most educated people tend to gravitate towards the bigger cities. So what usually happens in every society is children start schooling in the villages, but they want to work in the bigger towns. And their children want to work and study in the bigger cities, and those in the bigger cities want to go overseas. But there's usually a continuum and a transition from primary school to secondary school to tertiary, and then joining whatever industry that qualifies you to join at the end. This movement of children, I did my NYC in Ogun State in the southern parts of Nigeria. That was actually the first time I saw a boarding primary school. I never thought that parents would send their children, but when you look at the distances between schools, you could also understand where some people were coming from. So Al-Majiri is really just the Hausa version of Al-Muhajir. Al-Muhajir in Arabic means, from the word hijrah, a migrant. So somebody who has migrated from usually a rural area to a more urban area, or from a smaller town to a larger town for studies. So this is there's nothing strange or new about that. What has happened, however, and I should say that education is in the mother tongue of the people. You know, just like Chinese learn to be doctors in Chinese or Mandarin or Cantonese, the Turks learn it in Turkey, the Arabs learn it in their own language. These children learn their education in Hausa. They can read, they can write, but they use the Arabic alphabet, which is called Ajami, for Hausa purposes. So if you look at our currency, the Naira note, You have on the 1,000 Naira bill, Naira Dubutaya. It's in Arabic letters, but it's Hausa. So you had a whole civilization in this area with their educational systems in place. The challenge, however, with colonialism is it now required that if you're going to work in the industry, if you're going to work in the government, you have to now speak the vernacular. We have to remember that in the village, English is vernacular. In northern Nigeria, in many parts, English is actually the vernacular in the rural areas. But by insisting children's education has to be in the vernacular, in a second language, without the support of parents, you definitely had lowering of standards.
Yeah.
For many...
Yeah, Sheikh, sorry to interrupt. May I ask you to probably switch off your camera because your sound isn't coming through as strong as it could. Maybe that would strengthen your bandwidth so we can all hear you well. Thank you,
No worries.
Sir. Yes.
Thank you.
I think that's better now.
Okay, good. So what you then had was this dislocation where children were going to study religion, and usually that was the first part of the curriculum. But if you look at the books of traditional religious studies like Iziya or Muwatta of Imam Malik, they learned admin, they learned about marriage, they learned about sales and Islamic finance, they learned how to run a whole society. What unfortunately, or just as a product of reality, is when this dislocation took place, the colonial system took the taxation away from the emirate councils who were in charge of the educational system. It was replaced with new tertiary, new qualifications. You had this dislocation where children were still coming from rural areas to bigger towns and to the cities to learn, but there was no transition, there was no integration. Unfortunately, we have had a history of poor leadership. The late Premier Sardauna of Sokoto, just before he was assassinated, tried to look at how to integrate the two systems so that there was a transition from the old to the modern. And many, my dad, many people were products. They had gone through the Almajiri system, they had studied under various teachers, but also went to school, So the challenge I think we're having now is we do have the Almajiri system now shrouded in a lot of things. There's parental abuse, parents who are neglecting their children have joined in. There's rural poverty where the harvest at the end of the year is not enough to take care of the whole family if you look at the impact of desertification. And so they have to send their children to relatives, friends of friends in town to study. And in the beginning of the rainy season, around this time, you find a lot of these children who are strong enough coming back to the villages to help their parents in agriculture. So in conclusion, what we also find, however, are bright spots. We find that within the Almajiri system, there has been evolution and adaptation. We have Islamia schools that teach the traditional Islamic curriculum side by side with the national curriculum. And a lot of this is not something that was initiated by the government, but it does not have government support to a very great extent. It is the rare governor, and here we have Malam with us. Most governors throughout, most states have not been lucky with their governors to have governors who actually care with empathy, to listen, to try and understand and see what's a thoughtful, respectful way of getting the government to take responsibility for its citizens. These Almajiris are the children of the people who feed this nation. When you eat kamu, or you eat rice, or you eat corn, or you give your chickens chicken feed, these are the children who go back home and are involved. The population, just to wrap up on that, of Almajiris, imagine the population of Botswana, Namibia, Gambia, and Mauritania combined. You know, imagine the population of Sierra Leone and Liberia combined. That's the number of children we're looking at. So I think, yeah, it's for us to take responsibility, avoid blame games, take examples of leaders who have taken the initiative of being proactive to care about the funding and the integration and carry on where Sedona stopped. Unfortunately, we have very, very few examples of this. And while there's a lot of room for improvement, I think we can see some bright spots.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so very much, Sheikh. Thank you for starting us off so very well. And I'm going to be returning to some of the things you have said, because I know once upon a time, God rest her soul, it was Professor Sophie Onwale who had said that the educational system in Nigeria needed overhauling. Why would we require all learners to think in the vernacular of another country, the English language? If I'm going to learn agriculture, or I'm going to learn Arabic or Hausa or Yoruba or Igbo, why do I need to learn the English language first and get a credit in the English language? The BBC is already well ahead of us. There is a pidgin language service in the BBC, and it tells you that the world has a lot to learn from Nigeria, and we need to rethink our educational system. I'm going to be returning to you, but I have to go next to Peter Hawkins, because recently Governor El-Rufai had thanked the UNICEF for their help, the UNICEF and other NGOs, for their help in restoring health and dignity to children who were affected by the forced movement, is the way I like to refer to it, across states back to, quote and unquote, their states of origin. And I know that I said earlier that 10 million children are out of school, and that's a staggering 7% of our total population, thereabout. 81% of out of school children also represents that 10 million we're talking about, Almajiri, the Almajiri children. But I know that for UNICEF, Peter, it's not just the Almajiri children, it's about enabling every child thrive. The quality of life of children should not be negotiated away. As you share your opening statement, can you let us understand what your concerns are as UNICEF around the issue of Almajiri, but also basically universal qualitative basic education for children in Nigeria? Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Amina, and welcome to everybody. And I want to take this opportunity to congratulate Akri and Sheikh Nurudeen and Mohammed for organizing this conference and for the participation of His Excellency, the Governor of Kaduna, and his leadership in the debate around Almajiri children, which is a debate that's been going on for, as you rightly said, for 300 years, and an issue that we've all been tackling with throughout our careers here in Nigeria. I think to start off with the complexity of the issue, and I think Sheikh outlined some of the issues very, very well. The Almajiri system started off about migration to learn. It's ended up now as a peril around poverty and access to education. In the rural areas, in many parts of the north, the access to education has been limited. And I'll come on to your direct question about the nature of that education. And therefore, people have migrated into town. They haven't been able to afford to look after the children. So an Almajiri system has been the default mechanism and has offered religious learning, which is very useful and an imperative at the same time. However, when the numbers have built up, and we're not sure of those numbers, so the question of how effective this is has come to the fore. I think at the essence of this, coming back to your question, is the nature of education. And education today is about learning, and the learning has to be at the beginning of your life in your native language, whether it's Hausa or what have you. But that is the basis of all education. Your mother tongue has to be your learning, and from there you can take off to move into different types of learning in different languages and in different ways. But at the beginning, it needs to be there. I think with the Almajiri system now, as it is, it's the fact that there is very little regulation around it. So we're not sure what learning the children are getting, and how they are progressing in that learning progress. We know for many of the children or the youth that are coming out, that their skills and their knowledge does not lend itself to the labor market, and they are finding it difficult to fit in and taking that forward. But what is key, I think, now is, as we move forward, is making sure that the rights and the needs of children, or the protection needs of children, are at the center of all of this. Where are they, and where do we want them to get to? And first and foremost of that is the registration and documentation of these children, to understand who they are and the fact that they are, as individuals, have a right to be protected. And then they go through the system, and the whatever system it is, to end up to be reintegrated into their communities. And I use the word reintegration rather than say reunification. Reintegration is threefold. One is that they go back to their communities and their families. Two, they have the means, or the families have the means to receive them back, the livelihood package to look after that children. And the third, and the most important, that they have access to learning within the community that they live in. And that is about changing the way that the communities think about that child, how they want to receive that child back into their community, how that child has a need to continue their learning and their access education. And it's not just the physical access to school, but it's the ability of the family to allow those children to be able to go to school, and all the indirect costs that are inherent in that.
Indeed. Many thanks, Peter. Livelihood, the community buy-in, and access, of course, to the family as well. Thank you so very much. MSK, Mohammed Sabo Keana, why Akri? I know that Akri is trying to put on the table a model that would help us jumpstart this all-important conversation. Community learning, Almajiri school system, class. In your opening statement, can you share with us why you think this is a pathway forward?
Thank you very much, Doctor, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining this important conversation today. Akri, just a little bit background of who we are. We are an advocacy platform that we started to bring the issue of the Almajiri children into the consciousness of the nation and on the world. We have observed that for many years, issues around these children have not been properly treated and given due consideration, at all levels. So Akri started as an advocacy and engagement platform to basically engage leaders and to hold them accountable on the issue of these children. And just like Malam has highlighted the initial intent of the Almajiri education system, for the children to go seek education for the purpose of learning the Quran. And as advocates for the Almajiri children, we are very much concerned about all of their rights. Their right to education, their right to decent shelter, their right to nutrition, their right to childhood, their right to parental care. And it is based on these rights that we have been, saying that their rights to, as children, as humans, are not optional. Many a times when we start talking about the issue of the Almajiri and crisis and all of that, we tend to focus on the education aspect of their rights, and then losing sight on other aspects. And so it's on the basis of all of this that we try to now look at, okay, what will be the best approach? What will be the best practice for us to adopt in order to achieve what we put as the interest of the stakeholders, which is education. The UNICEF will be very interested in Almajiri children having formal education or skill and all of that. The Malams, the parent, and the protagonists of the Almajiri system of education will want them to also continue to learn the Quran education and all of that. But we were more interested in, beside the education, we want the Almajiri children to have the right to childhood as children, They should have also a decent living condition when they go to seek education, whether in the Almajiri system or whether in the formal system of education. They should not beg on the street every day. They should have access to healthcare, you know. So it's in the consideration of the children having all of these rights that we came up with the concept of a community learning Almajiri school system as not the best, but as a near best approach in order that we can adopt to achieve the goal of them having both the Quran education and the formal education, as well as having their other fundamental right as children. And the reason behind that has to do with the issue of sustainability in terms of funding, and then also the issue of shared responsibility between the parents, the community, and the government. We all know that taking care of these children or achieving the education for them, whether it's a Quran education, whether it's a formal education, we need finance to do that. And government cannot do it alone. The parent also, we have also highlighted they lack the capacity to support their children. They can also do it. So we have also seen recently that a lot of people want to support these children. They want to support the education of these children. But I think we need a framework to be able to achieve this education. And that framework needs to be established for us to have a clear accountability and responsibility to share for everyone, between the parent, the community, and the government. For the parent, they can provide, no matter how little it is, either it is the shelter aspect, either the one food in a day. The government, we can be able to hold them accountable around provision of the structures and all of that. And the community can come together and also support it. So we strongly believe that if you have a framework like the class concept that have this shared responsibility and also prevent more children from coming into the system, you know, will go a long way to achieve what we want for them.
Excellent. Many thanks indeed, MSK. And I think the participants hear you, because the comments here are absolutely inspiring. And yes, it's got to be a framework that is a shared responsibility. Parents would have a role. Someone is talking about being responsible for the number of children that you have. That's a conversation I'm sure that will come up as today progresses inevitably. But now I must invite the governor for his opening remarks. Amina Nasir, sir, you have listened to your co-panelists, and you've heard about the philosophical underpinning and the fact that at the heart of Al-Majiranchi is actually a quest for knowledge. But it has, just like public education, been caught up, you know, by all of the lack of attention, lack of funding, if you will. It's a policy that was truncated because, you know, Sardauna Sakwato could not complete that vision. And here you are today. Sheikh Lemu had alluded to the fact that we need to have a rare leadership. And he has referred to you as a rare leader. And I, for one, am very happy to see you today, because I know a few weeks ago, you were actually in self-isolation because you also were affected by the COVID-19 virus, and we're very happy to see you here. And you know, thinking about this morning, I was asking myself, something must have changed why Malam was under lockdown for 2 to 3 or more weeks. And maybe it was a time for you to have reflected once more on the issue of what this COVID-19 moment needs for governance and for leadership. And then lo and behold, Kano State sent some children into Kaduna State. And the government had the foresight to quarantine those children. But for that action, the entire community might have had increased spread. Now, if we are looking for rare leadership in Northern Nigeria, Malam Nasir, what is your take about that rare leadership? Is the North ready, or is it only Kaduna State that is ready? Your turn, sir.
Thank you very much, Amina, for the kind introduction. And I want to appreciate all my colleagues, the panelists, Keana, Sheikh, Lemu, and Peter Hawkins for laying down the framework. I adopt and I agree with everything that they have said. I am particularly grateful to Sheikh Nurudeen for giving the historical and cultural context of that has led us to where we are regarding Almajiri education. With that understanding, I think it's important for us to look at the reality of where we are today. Millions of children out of school, millions of children living in impossible conditions. It is even doubtful whether they are getting any solid education. What is clear is that they are not getting any education and skills to prepare them for the 21st century. What is also clear is that we are producing a generation of young people who can only in the future be spiritualists and marabouts and potential recruits for the likes of Boko Haram. Without modern education, without skills, how they will survive will be a big question. So when we came into office, quite frankly, in 2015, it was clear to us that the Almajiri problem is both an educational, cultural, and a potential security problem. And we started thinking about it and what to do with it. Amina asked about rare leadership. I think that the decision taken by the Northern States Governors Forum collectively, all 19 of us, some weeks back, to abolish the Almajiri system of education and insist that we should run a hybrid system in which children go to school in the morning, go to formal modern schools in the morning, and get their Quranic or Islamic education in the afternoon, which is what we did. I went to school in the morning up to 2 o'clock, and around 3 o'clock, we go to Islamia school, and that's how I got most of my Quranic education. And after we were done with the Quran, we started learning fiqh, Qawaidi, Akri, Muqtasar, and so on and so forth. That's how we got most of our education before we even went to secondary school. And we think that that's the way to go. We think that these children must have both modern education, I don't want to call it Western education, and religious education. And we believe that, and in Kaduna State, we found that there are 1 or 2 Islamia schools that, as Sheikh Nurudeen explained, run this hybrid system in which they have Quranic education, Islamic education, side by side with a complete curriculum of primary and secondary education. So this was our thoughts from day one. Okay, I know a lot has been said about the need to, convert our educational system so that we all learn in vernacular. That is the ideal situation. But I face a 4-year election cycle. I don't think I will be able to achieve that in 8 years, even if I get re-elected. And this move from teaching or basing our educational system around the English language to vernacular requires a national conversation and an agreement as to which vernacular, which local language do we use, because we have over 550 languages, even if our constitution recognizes 3 or 4 as recognized languages. Which language do we use for our education, and how do we rewrite all our textbooks and everything in every subject, including the sciences, into vernacular? So it's a huge national conversation, which I think we should start. I think we can work on it. But, realistically, when I was elected governor of Kaduna State, I know that there is nothing I can do about it. So I took it as a given that education will continue to be in the English language. Modern education has to be in the English language. And my challenge is, how do I get the Almajiri schools integrated? We found 3 programs already on the table. There was what is called IQTE, integrating Quranic schools, by getting the Ministry of Education to provide teachers, to provide some kind of levels of numeracy and literacy, modern literacy and numeracy, to augment the Quranic schools. That has been tried. I think it has not worked, frankly. We found a World Bank program called BESDA, which provides funding to enable us hire teachers that will impart numeracy and literacy skills to these Almajiri clusters. Again, I am not sure that has been successful. The program is still being implemented. the concerns of many of the governors, like the governor of Kano State, complained to me that, okay, if we do that, BESDA's program will fund these teachers for the duration of the program. What happens after? The state governments have to now take them over, adding to their burden for the payment of teachers. So the state governments are also looking at this with a critical eye to see what are the long-term costs. There is a program being proposed by the Islamic Development Bank called Bilingual Education, which is very similar to IQTE and BESDA. Bilingual education program essentially provides funding to particular states. Kaduna was one of those selected, to reduce the number of out-of-school children by giving them a mix of modern as well as Islamic education. So these are the programs. But for us, and I have to, here, I want to be very honest and blunt about this. As far as we are concerned in the Kaduna State government, we see the Almajiri problem now more of a cultural problem. It is only the Hausa Fulani man that will be on an income of 10,000 naira a month, marry 4 wives, have 15 children that he knows he's incapable of looking after, and the best way to outsource the responsibility for their upbringing, parental responsibility, is to hand them over to Almajiri, to an Almajiri teacher. This is what our people are doing. If you look across Nigeria, and I can say this because I'm Hausa Fulani, you'll never find a Nupe man doing Almajiri. You'll never find a Yoruba man doing Almajiri. We have Yorubas in the north, we have Nupes in the north, we have other ethnic groups in the north. Only the Hausas and the Fulanis outsource parental responsibility to some Malam to bring up their children, to educate them, to clothe them, and feed them without paying that person a penny. But what have we found since we started x-raying the Almajiri system closely? We found that part of the reason why the Almajiris beg, because for those of us that are in their 50s and 60s, the Almajiris of those days don't beg during the day. They only beg in the evening for dinner, for food. They will go from house to house begging you to give them the remnants of the food that you have eaten. They don't beg during the day. But what we have now established is that every Wednesday, every Almajiri in Kaduna State at least is required to give his Malam Wednesday allowance, 200 naira. So during the week, the Almajiri boy must beg, work, or steal and deliver that 200 naira. If he doesn't, he gets abused. He gets seriously punished. That 200 naira on Wednesday must be delivered to the Malam. So here are parents giving birth to a multiplicity of children, outsourcing responsibility to someone else without paying him, and that person getting paid anyway by forcing the children into forced labor, begging, or abuse. This is what we have found since we started x-raying this problem. What else have we found? We found in 1 or 2 cases that it is the not seen him for 5 years, but the father told her that they went to the farm and the child got lost, that he's missing. So as far as she was concerned, her child was missing, presumably dead. The father never told her that he had given up his child for Almajiri. So these are the issues these are the realities of what we are finding in the Kaduna State government. So what did we do? You know, we started thinking about this, as I said, since we came into office in 2015. So we decided that we'll take a series of sequential steps that will get us to this point where every Almajiri child must go to school. the first thing we did is to start expanding our schools, our primary schools and secondary schools, because we know that we would have hundreds of thousands of children to put back to school. We also started expanding and equipping our vocational and training centers, because we have 24 of them, business apprenticeship training centers, and we had the support of DFID to expand some of them, because some of the Almajiri children, those that are already 15 and 16, cannot go to primary school, cannot go to secondary school. So we have to have a crash program of numeracy and literacy for them, and then put them to learn skills. So we spent the last 4 or 5 years expanding the number of classrooms we have. They're already congested. We needed to expand them so that we can take these children when the time comes. That's one. We also passed a law prohibiting street hawking and begging as a first step, because we realized that many of the Almajiri children and other children are used by their parents or by the Malams to engage in street hawking and begging. So we have that law in place. Then we announced free and compulsory education for all in Kaduna State for the first 12 years of education. Basic education is already free across Nigeria. Okay, in some states they charge some nominal fees. In Kaduna we abolished all fees, but went further to say even senior secondary education is free. Vocational education is free for those that have finished junior secondary school. So we have that in place, and we have done a lot of investment in infrastructure to be able to take this additional influx. We also domesticated the Child Rights Act. We're one of the few northern states, maybe the only one, that has actually domesticated the Child Rights Act. We called it the Child Welfare and Protection Law, and we have fully domesticated it. And in that law, the specific rights of a child to education, to health care, and to parental care are specified, and there are sanctions for failure to provide that care. There are also sanctions for violence against children, and a child is defined as anyone below the age of 18. So we passed that law. And we also took a decision that primary and junior secondary schools will be day schools. So for you to attend these schools, you must be under the care of your parents. But for senior secondary school, the last 3 years of secondary school will all be boarding, so that we get children from various backgrounds, from various parts of the state, you know, to interact and bond and form lifetime friendships, as many of us did when we went to boarding secondary schools. So these are the basic components of our education policy. Of course, along the line, we had to get rid of 22,000 teachers that were unqualified. We did the test and got rid of them, and we've hired 25,000 new qualified teachers. So the quality of our public education has improved significantly. And I took the decision to enroll my son into a public school to show that I have confidence in the quality of public schools. So this is the framework that we put in place, Amina. But Absolutely. The whole idea is every child in Kaduna State, Almajiri or not, must go to school. And what we started, which the Northern State Governors Forum adopted, is that we must take Almajiri children from the care of their teachers back to the care of their parents, so that they go to formal schools in the afternoon and continue their Quranic education or Islamic education in the evening. In Kaduna State, we established a regulatory agency called the Schools Quality Assurance Authority that will license schools, that will license not only public schools, but private schools, including Quranic schools. We are not prohibiting Quranic education, no, but we are saying any child below the age of 18 cannot go to any other school other than the school that offers full primary and secondary curriculum side by side with Quranic education. So we'll license some Quranic schools, providing they provide 12 years of formal education or modern education side by side with Quranic education. No school will be allowed to stand alone just during Almajiri. And we found a few surprising things also about the Almajiri system. We've now found that there are co-educational Almajiri schools, girls and boys being mixed. We didn't know this. This was not usual in the old Almajiri system. Only boys are in this system, but we have found girls. We found 2 schools in which boys and girls were being mixed. They sleep in the same hall with all the risks and the dangers to the girls, and we're prosecuting the Malams for that. What we have done, and this is my final point, is last week, the Kaduna State Executive Council approved a bill that we will send to the House of Assembly titled Itinerant Education or Almajiri Prohibition Law. We are prohibiting that system. We want every child to be with his parents and get formal education, modern education in the morning, and Quranic education in the afternoon. And for those Quranic schools, we require them to fully comply with the rules of the Quality Assurance Authority, which requires modern education to be part and parcel of the curriculum. So this is what we are trying to do. And I'm happy to say that when we started this, Kaduna State more or less unilaterally started this. We have so far taken 35,000 Almajiris that are not indigenous to Kaduna State back to their states so that they will be reunited with their parents so that they will go to school. We have done so with thousands of our own Almajiris back to their parents, and we have, with the support of UNICEF, we have properly documented them, and they will all go to school as soon as schools open. Each and every one of them must go to school. And any parent that does not allow his child to go to school would be prosecuted and could face a jail term. Any person that operates or enrolls any child in Almajiri school that is not licensed by the State Quality Assurance Authority will not only be fined for every child, but could go to jail and may lose the building. The building that the Almajiri school is operating will be forfeited to the government of the state, and title to that may be revoked and the building may be demolished. So we are taking very stringent measures to ensure that every child goes to school. This is what we are concerned with. Every child must go to school, and every child must also get his religious education. We have no problems with that, but we do not think the two are mutually exclusive. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you, Malam. And I did allow you more than 3 minutes because as you were talking, we're having a lot of Q&A, about 98 comments, and your interventions were addressing the comments. So I didn't want to break your flow. People wanted to know about the strategies, and you've talked about the strategies. People wanted to understand how the community is going to be, integrated into this new idea that you have. Participants were concerned that abolishing this quote and unquote Al-Majiranchi system was not going to be the solution, but integrating it will be the solution. And you went along that line to talk about a hybrid where you have squarely focused on access to basic, qualitative, universal education as the answer. If poverty were a crime, some of us who went to school would not have gone to school, because I'm a proud product of a public school system, and my father couldn't have afforded a private school system, but because he was just a blue-collar worker. And so poverty should not be a crime, and education is the way to break out of poverty. I'm going to stay with you, Malam Nasir, because there are certain thoughts in that direction. And 1 or 2 questions that I want to put on the table for you to help address, therefore. So some participants are asking that they're very proud of what you're trying to do in Kaduna, but they want to see a strategy that addresses it from a regional perspective. And yes. one contribution had said, are you thinking about having a Northern Nigeria conference? Because it's not just the House of Fulani. Someone said to let you know that the Kanuri are equally guilty of this in northeastern Nigeria. They also send their children away. Well, they would like you to speak to that.
House of Fulani Kanuri cultures are the same. I'm sorry, I forgot the Kanuri. They are as bad as we are.
They are. So please note that question, Mala. I'm going to add a second one to that. And that is the fact that it's very important to have the law, which the Kaduna State House of Assembly would be passing, hopefully very soon. But law is a necessary but insufficient condition. What will be the other, and you've talked about the educational strategy dimension. I want you to look at the livelihood and the dignity dimension. The reason why I say this is because you said something very fundamental earlier. You brought the gender dimension into this discourse. You talked about the fact that a mother would have done things differently.
Yes.
And in the north of Nigeria, the voices of women are almost always minoritized. Not because women are in the minority, but their voices are minoritized. And if we get more power in the hands of women, maybe the strategy that Kaduna and northern Nigeria will create will be more sustainable. Even in the Almajiri system, patriarchy has crept in, Malam Nasir. There are girl Almajiri, but nobody talks about them.
Yes.
I never knew myself that they existed until Mohammed Keana asked me to sponsor some Almajiri, and he said, Amina, it will interest you to know that they are girls. And I'm like, seriously? Those are the ones I want to go for. So it's even silenced, even in the midst of a lot of suffering. We're not talking about the gender dimension. So original perspective to Al-Majiranchi, the law not being enough, how do we then look at other dimensions, and especially the gender dimension? You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Amina. Look, starting with the regional dimension, as I said, Kaduna State, the Kaduna State government has been studying this for 5 years, and we decided that this is the time. We have put all the components in place. This is the time to do it. And we started. I started because I did not believe that the northern state governors will all support what we are doing. But we are used to being mavericks in Kaduna State government. We are used to doing things that, when we decided that we're going to test primary school teachers, we were told that Kayode Fayemi lost his election because he threatened to test teachers. Once I test teachers, I was going to lose my second term of office. And we went ahead and did that. And we won our election anyway. So we are used to taking this kind of risks, and we did. But we started returning these Almajiris to their states. And by the time we came to the Northern State Governors Forum and we outlined our reasons and our strategy for doing what we're doing, I'm happy to say that all the Northern governors, without exception, all 19 of us agreed that this is the way to go. We agreed that the question of modernizing a system that has never worked for any state or any country. We have tried to study the Almajiri system as practiced in Nigeria to see where it has worked in any part of the world. And the closest example we found was in Afghanistan, which led to the Taliban. So we decided that this is not going to work. So all the northern governors agreed to adopt the Kaduna State template with modifications. So they asked us for the template and we shared it with them. Our Commissioner of Human Services and Social Development, Hafsat Bab, very energetic and passionate woman, spearheaded this. And, we shared the template. And I want to say that without exception, all the northern governors have adopted this. So there is a regional consensus around this. And the COVID-19 pandemic provided just the window of opportunity to be able to have the Almajiris in fixed locations, because the lockdown provided an opportunity to be able to collect them and be able to document and test them and repatriate them. So that's what the northern states have been doing. That's how we got 169 from Kano, out of which 67 tested positive for COVID. Alhamdulillah, they are all treated now, they are fine. We got some from Nasarawa, Plateau, I think Gombe states as well. And we're asking every state, send us those that are indigenous to Kaduna State, because we want to take them to their parents. We want them to grow under the care and love of their parents. That's one. Yes, Amina, the law is not enough. The law is just to put a framework in place and a deterrent. We don't want to jail people. We don't want to fine people. We want people to see the value in education. So we're going to be engaging a lot of advocacy in parental responsibility, the values of education, and so on and so forth. We are working with our local government chairman, our social development officers at the local government level to explain to the parents the value of this. But most importantly, we have realized one thing, that the outsourcing of parental responsibility is mostly a male decision. Mothers will never give up their children for Almajiri. It is always the men that do this. It's always the men that override the women. And our child rights, welfare, and protection law protects the child from this. And we are going to do a lot of publicity, a lot of community engagement, a lot of advocacy to show to parents the importance of parental responsibility. Side by side with that, of course, is some kind of advocacy about, you know, controlling the number of children. You know, have as many children as you know you can properly look after. Because, you know, having 15 children and 4 wives when your monthly income is 10,000 naira is not quite responsible. We have got the buy-in of religious leaders. For instance, if you look at the statistics, and you know, UNFPA will confirm this, Kaduna State has the highest use of contraceptive in the entire northern region. And we're able to achieve that because we got the support of Islamic clerics to preach child spacing, to use verses from the Quran and the hadiths of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to give religious legitimacy to child spacing. Not to say contraception. No. Don't use that word. Child spacing is in the interest of the health of the mother. Is in the interest of the family for you to just space children. And with that campaign in the last 4 or 5 years, Kaduna State has achieved fertility rates of near 4.6%, which is the lowest in northern Nigeria and even lower than many southern states. So we have found that, you know, engaging with religious leaders, putting the facts before them, showing them all sides of the story, plays a very important role in trying to get people involved. So we are not passing the law as the silver bullet. No, we need to do a lot of community engagement. We need to bring traditional leaders. We need to bring religious leaders. We need to work with civil society organizations and continue to talk to the parents. I will be going around myself as a person. I'll be going around to local governments. I will visit the homes of some of these Almajiris that have been repatriated to talk to them, to talk to the parents and encourage them, because we found that that kind of interaction, you know, plays a very important role. We saw that during the elections. You know, everywhere I visited, every household that I visited, I got 100% of the votes, because they have never seen a governor visit their household. So we know that this kind of personal touch changes the minds of people. So we're going to do a lot of that. So excellent. There is a regional framework. There is this engagement. I've forgotten your last point.
It was about gender, but I think
yes,
you have touched on
yes,
it.
We have addressed that.
Livelihood and gender.
Yes, and Amina, if you notice that there is something we're doing in Kaduna State. There is no state in the north that has projected women at the highest levels and given them solid responsibility like Kaduna. We are doing so intentionally because we want to send a message that a Kaduna girl is not just a wife. She's a future commissioner. She's a future permanent secretary. She's a future governor. She's a future president. And we are doing that very, very deliberately. We are doing that very deliberately because 50% of our population is women, and we do not believe any society can make progress clapping with one hand. We must get our women up there. We must make them visible. We must make everyone in Kaduna State believe that what a man can do, a woman can do at least as well or even better. And we've tried to do that in Kaduna State, and we hope to do more so that that gender dimension will be taken for granted in our state. And our hope is that what we are doing in Kaduna and the successes we've achieved will have a salutary effect on our neighbors that are yet to get up to speed in that area.
Thank you so very much, Malam. And as you were talking, the Honorable Minister for Women Affairs came in and had to, I think, step out. I can see my sister Juma Idonije, who is holding space. Thank you very much. And I could hear her chuckle when you talked about the fact that Kaduna State takes women's rights very seriously. Welcome, Juma. We learned that the Honorable Minister is with Mr. President. We're happy to have you here. Thank you, Malam, for the intervention. And you're right, when the language around family planning changed to Tazara Haihuwa from Kaya de Iyali, people began to understand that it was about spacing so that the woman can at least have a breather and not about telling you the number of children you should have. So language is always very powerful. And thank you for bringing that to the room. Yeah, Sheikh, I would like to return to you, sir, as a segue from Malam Nasir's last intervention. About the fact that this has a religious connotation, but it's more of a cultural thing, but religious leaders have a role to play. And to sort of weave that into some of the questions that have been coming in. Because when you spoke earlier, my understanding is that you do not see Al-Majiranchi as a religious thing. It's not a problem of Muslims. It's a failure of universal basic primary education to start with. I would like you to speak a bit more to that. Second is a question that I have here in the chat box. And Tahir had said, it might be difficult to eradicate Al-Majiranchi completely because there's a market for their services. Society comes to the Malams for Allah, that's to supplicate to the Almighty. And it is the Al-Majiri that are given the assignment to write the Rubutu. The Rubutu is to use the ink, which is seen as a holy ink, to sort of write holy text and for people to drink and to have some fortification and you know, faith that solution will be found. And so he's saying that they also collect a fee for this. And so the Malam prescribes Sauka for 10 to 20 Al-Majiri. Sauka means you read the entire Quran from Surah Al-Fatiha to Surah Al-Nas. The entire 114 chapters of the Quran, and so it's a source of income. Now, what's the role of the Malams? Because you are part of a committee that's looking at transforming this system, and so we would like to hear from you, Ya Sheikh.
Okay, thank you very much, Malam El-Rufai, and it's really inspiring to hear all that's going on. And on the question of the role of religion, I think our society is one where very often when we see religious institutions and groups able to mobilize communities for particular purposes, we find politicians becoming interested in the religious leadership, instrumentalizing them for that purpose. After elections are over, religious leaders are just viewed as a nuisance, you know, people you don't want to deal with. However, when we look at the rights of women in society and the rights of women in Islam, the issues surrounding poverty and the use of zakat, the Al-Majiri thing, etc. And I entirely agree with the Honorable Governor Malam El-Rufai. When we look at the population of Al-Majiris and we find 90-something% of them belonging to specific ethnic groups, even though you have Muslims in many other, you have Yoruba Muslims, you have Egbira Muslims, Nupe Muslims, Gwari Muslims, and the list goes on. The fact that there's a serious concentration of Al-Majiris in a particular ethnic group should make us see that the denominator among Al-Majiris is not religion. If not, this would have crossed elsewhere. But to look at the specific historical context, cultural context. Having said that, because in Islamic jurisprudence, there's a maxim which states al-ada muhakkama, that custom has the weight and respect of legislation. In other words, if a cultural practice is considered good, it is given the weight of religion. Having said that, religious scholars also know that they actually have another maxim, La yunkar tagirul hukum bi tagirul zaman, that there is no denying that with the change in context will be the change in religious verdicts. And so even if religious scholars at a particular time put their stamp of approval on this system of Almajiri system, the fact that the context has changed, now we see more abuses, now we see the benefit of that particular knowledge becoming restricted. And while that knowledge is useful, or some of it is more useful than others, there are other forms of knowledge that have become fardu kifaya, essential knowledge that every Muslim should learn in order to be able to better take care of their communities, their families, etc. The challenge, I think, is how do we invest in our religious scholars? How do we build their own capacities to handle each other? It is a religious scholar that is best to neutralize the extremism or abuses or wrong ideology of another religious scholar. So if you have an extremist, for example, say Boko Haram, it's a scholar. There's a reason why Boko Haram would want to kill somebody like Sheikh Jafar or Sheikh Albani. It's because, yeah, no, exactly. It's because they know that these people have authority within their circles, and students would leave one scholar and go to the scholar that has the best arguments, because that undermines the succession planning of a particular scholar if he hasn't got intelligent students. So I think when it comes to the role of religious scholars, what we need to do, while we educate teachers to teach our children chemistry, physics, and all the other important things, we need to intellectually vaccinate our students, our scholars, with understanding of religion that is progressive and useful and not retrogressive or stuck in history. So I think on one side, there's the need to ensure that this is not just a job of just the governors and the government, but of the whole community and its various stakeholders, because unfortunately, the nature of democracy, which is a strength in another context, is that a governor is there for what is equivalent to a sprint period, 4 years or 8 years, not a marathon. And unless the governors are able to come up with a better succession planning, or the political party is able to ensure that it's a marathon and a relay where the baton is passed on to someone else that can do things better, it will fail, unfortunately. But this is where I think what the Honorable Governor Malam Nasir is doing, of institutionalizing things so that it's part of a system, not just the vision of an individual. And I think an area of focus is how to not just give the Malams a responsibility after you build their capacity and you certify their standards, so that there's standards in who is speaking on behalf of Islam, but also to ensure they take that responsibility so that when this governor leaves, whoever is coming back again would find it difficult to undo the good that has been done, but to also look at this as an experiment. Some of, what has been said about the economy of the poor and the market for Almajiris and Malams and all of that, sometimes you would definitely need laws to tackle abuses. You will need more competent Malams to tackle and help identify and neutralize the arguments of those who make a business of so-called, fortune telling, all sorts of things that go as forms of abuse of religion. So I think the issue of better succession planning and better putting of systems in place that are accepted by the Malams, by the most competent, giving them more scholarship so that they actually, you bridge build between them and they appreciate the wisdom and they can tell you the kind of language and framing that would make it easier for others to accept.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sheikh. We need to look to the Malams. We need to look at the political economy dimension, I think is what I hear you say, because it's not religious, it's a livelihood matter. And we have to look at it from that perspective as well in order to create the freedoms that we need for these children and to give them the dignity that they deserve. At a point in time, Malam Nasir, I'm going to return to you to ask you questions about budget, how much resources you intend to match this idea. But just hold the thought, sir. I'm going to ask Peter, because Peter, some of the things that we're hearing, and to summarize some of the comments in the chat box, is around the fact that some of these Almajiri are no longer children. They're 18 and above, and they have been in this system of life, way of life, all their lives. And the thinking is that our institutional framework needs to think about age-appropriate skills and technology, vocational training. And we also need to think about ensuring that we even have the data. How many of the children? Where are they? And how are we preparing the communities to receive them? Remember, they left the community because they wanted to seek a better life elsewhere. And the question has been posed to UNICEF directly, because the point was made earlier that I think the governor said in Hausa, it's you need all hands on deck. So we want to hear the hand of UNICEF. What would be your take on thinking about age-appropriate interventions for those who are over 18, and also a community framework that is able to incorporate livelihood? Over to you, Peter.
Absolutely, and it's a very, very important point. And I would be talking here as not only UNICEF, but on behalf of the United Nations as a whole, in all its scope. And we talk about this a lot. What can we offer for age-appropriate training? Not only, I think it's from 15-year-olds and above, and how can we create an environment on skills development, but also jobs. I mean, the most important part is getting the two together, the skills development and the jobs. And there is an initiative called the Generation Unlimited, which is a global initiative, a global platform, which we have adopted and brought into Nigeria to use that to help look at what are the educational needs of children, what are the skills of those seeking the job market, but most importantly, what are the jobs and the skills that jobs require for people to come through. But if I may, because we are also moving into a stage in our economic development here in Nigeria where there are going to be certain constraints coming in over the next year with the tightening of the budget. And it's critical that at state level, the budget is kept intact for education and for health, and even increased. The federal budget will change, the state budget will reduce. But investing in the future of this country at this stage is so critical, and investing in education at this point in time is more important than ever. Got to think of the fact that children have been out of school for a number of months. We need to encourage them to go back into school. Communities have seen the value of children remaining at home. There aren't any extra costs of sending children to school, and that has to be overcome, and children must be sent back to school. And the investment in rural, especially rural education, is key now to ensure that the learning opportunity and the skills that children and the youth require will allow for their own future development and their own future aspirations. And then there's the investment in jobs and in livelihoods that is crucial in the rural area, as well as obviously in the urban areas, to ensure that those skills and the jobs are compatible and are able to move forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so very much. Peter, that's an excellent template. And I'm only preaching to the converted when I say it is something that I would like to propose that you make as a formal submission to Malam Nasir. Because it tells us not just the minds of UNICEF, but you're also talking about the entire UN system. And at moments like this, we need our friends thinking with us. Money always follows good idea. It's really about the idea first, and then the resources would always come. Thank you very much for your intervention. MSK, I would like to come to you briefly, Mohammed Sabo Keana. So one of the earlier questions that we had was from a colleague in Yobe who said that they would like to feel the winds of Akri in the Northeast. They feel you're doing fantastic work in the Northwest, and they would like to see you also extend your tentacles to the northeastern part of Nigeria, because, you know, like we said earlier, it's something that they're also affected by, not just in the northwestern part of Nigeria alone. And I wanted you to speak a little bit to your network and how you're structured and how you're trying to implement class. Are you working with government? Are you working with civil society organizations, private sectors? What exactly is the structure you have to reach the communities and to also connect to policymakers?
Thank you very much, Doctor. Just also to complement all what the governor said, Malam said. I mean, it's all in line with all what we all also want for these children. All of us, we have always been looking for an opportunity where we'll have a common ground between those who want these children to have Quran education and those who want these children to have the formal education. And I think from the conversation by both Malam and Sheikh Nurudeen Lemu, as well as the UNICEF, we have that some sort of understanding that indeed these children can have both of this, both education and also skills that will grant them at least some fair opportunity in the future. So to the question about our presence in the Northeast, I think maybe the gentleman is not aware, but we are in Yobe, we are in Maiduguri, and for the past few years that we have been doing the advocacy, we have indeed been engaging and working with the government at those levels. I was in Maiduguri myself last year. We met with the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Poverty Alleviation. In fact, she was in one of our last year program during the Almajiri Child Rights Day in Maiduguri. So we are there. And what we have been doing over the years, all our activities have always been centered and structured around interfacing with the children, interfacing with the Malams, you know, engaging them, trying to also explain to them, also enlighten them of the fact that these children could have both form of education, both Islamic education as well as the formal education. But of course, our capacity has not indeed reached to the extent where we will have to go to the communities, I mean, engaging parents and all of that. For now, we have largely been around the Malam and the children where they are. And so the structure of the class is an idea where we think that, take for instance, my village in Keana local government. If we have Almajiri school in Keana local government, and it's interesting to know that a lot of our traditional rulers, you know, have, I don't want to also make some controversial comment on that, but, you know, a lot of them have not also been responsive to their responsibility of knowing what goes around their local community. Because I strongly believe that they would have been the champion of reformation of the Almajiri system, you know, even before governors and all of that should come in. Just imagine having an Almajiri school or center in your community and you don't know anything about it, you know. So but what we're trying to do in trying to institutionalize the class is to engage, is to meet the traditional rulers, the local government chairman, to say that as a community, as a society, can you take the responsibility of coming together to ensure that the Almajiri children within your community are able to organize themselves. You as a stakeholder in this community, so that you're able to organize yourself to provide some little bit support to the Almajiri student, whereby you can talk to the Malam to adjust his timetable for the Almajiri children, where he allows them to go to school in the morning, you know, from just like what Malam said he went through, for the Malam to adjust their timetable from 8 to 2, and when they come back, they can continue with their formal with their Quran education. So this is the idea we are sharing with community leaders, and we have started that in my village in Keana local government. And the idea is to have such structures. We don't have Almajiri as or indigenous in our community, in our society, but we feel that as humans and as fellow citizens, we can begin to reform the system and introduce such model for communities that where these children come from. And if we're able to achieve that, and the community where these children come from, if they're able to also replicate such idea and model within their community, and with complementing with enlightenment, information intervention, just like Malam said, enlightening the parent of the possibility of having both education going on together. And then over the time, we can be able to have all of these children back to their original community, and we don't have more coming in. So it's a kind of a long and a strategic approach that I think we can be able to adopt to, first of all, mop up the children from the streets, prevent more from coming, and then scale it up across the community. And then that would go a long way to be able to address the issue of out-of-school children, but also a long-term framework to address the issue around the Almajiri system. But let me also mention that if we properly structure this framework, we can be able to make it like a production hub for the northern part of the country, where skills centers can be institutionalized, can be taught for the children, for those who are not, who are above school age. So it's something that is doable, and it's something that we can achieve. But let me also make the point about the laws in Kaduna by Malam. And I strongly want to also believe that laws are good, but implementations are better. And we have also seen that we have not been, successive government have tried severally to either abolish and all of that, but that has not worked. I pray that what Malam is trying to achieve in Kaduna works, but I strongly believe that we can be able to achieve a reformation that would lead to an end of Almajiri's practice without shooting a bullet, you know, and because this is a social norm, and for you to address a social norm, you need everybody to go on with, to carry along, you know. And right now we are seeing a lot of people who think that abolishing the Almajiri system should not be the case and all of that. We as advocates, we just want the best for the children, but we also want a strategy that is long-lasting, that is sustainable, and such that if Malam leaves, we are not back to the same situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, MSK. Thank you for your intervention. Malam Nasir, sir, I want to add to the host of questions that you have in front of you to just know. So a point that came in was around saying, well, it's well and good to focus on Almajiri children. What about children in orphanages? What about children from broken homes? Because I know how very passionate you are about children in orphanages from your FCT days as Honorable Minister. And I thought we should actually add that to the question that you're going to be helping us address shortly. But first, I want to return to Sheikh Lemu. Sheikh Lemu, one of the suggestions that are kind of emerging right now is that government and friends of government, like the UN system, should consider a process of giving conditional cash transfers to the families and the tutors or the malams of these children as a way of enabling a safety net. The social investment portfolio of the federal government actually already does that. And so I think that intervention was coming from the point of view of saying, these are also people who have a certain means of livelihood going to now lose. And in order to incentivize them to think in a new way and to transform the system, it would be good to think about a conditional cash transfer. That's one question coming to you. And for you to probably also help us talk about this Sangaya system. I've seen a few comments on it to say that what happened to the federal government's investment in ensuring that there's qualitative learning within an acceptable cultural milieu for these children. Is it something that you're familiar with? Are there lessons that we can take away from there as the Northern leadership duty bearers are thinking about transforming the system? Thank you, Sheikh.
Okay. About suggestions to have incentives, whether for the Malams, whether for parents, suggestions, and things that have been done as far back as the time of His Excellency Sheikh in Kanu, where agreements were arrived at with rural parents of bags of fertilizer and things on the condition that their children would stay with them and carry on there. Local Malams who had other incentives, scholarship for education, a stipend. After a while, they would be qualified for teaching jobs in schools, etc. So I think that on this subject area, because you want a holistic approach, there's no would this work or would this work? There's no either or. It's difficult to talk about versus this versus that. It's all about and. It's just, however, to be sensitive to the context that while certain incentives may work, they can also be abused. They can also create some addiction and dependency on the government, and you'd like to find a way of weaning people off that type of measure. However, just to answer the question, would it be useful? I am sure there are many contexts in which it would be useful, and I think the Honorable Malam would probably have more practical examples on that one. On the issues to do with the Tsangaya system, which was supported, especially during the Jonathan regime, where is it now? I honestly have not been following. A lot of meetings I've attended on this has not been good news. Schools were built in places far from where the students needed to be, things incomplete. So I'm not familiar with where are these things now and how have the governments carried on correcting whatever anomalies might have gone wrong. So yeah, that's what I would say there. No either or, just and, no bad ideas.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sheikh. Malam Nasir, another question coming your way to note, sir. Someone wants a clear confirmation that have you said you are going to ban Al-Majiranchi in Kaduna State and you're going to ban Bara? This contributor thinks there are two different things and they want you to help explain more. MSK, I wanted to ask you if you've heard anything about this Angaya school and to respond to a question that's come up about whether or not you're doing orientation work with Malams as well.
Okay. Yes, I mean, we have gone through some of the Jonathan's Al-Majiranchi Sangaya school that were built during the Jonathan's school and Jonathan's regime. And so I can say one or two, and I've also engaged the Federal Ministry of Education to know the state of those schools and all of that. And the schools indeed were built across the country. We have several in my state, Nasir state, and across the northern state. But very few are functional. I mean, those very few, those in Sokoto are functional. Just one or two or three of those are only functional in Sokoto. But here is the reason why the school did not, are not functioning right now because of certain factors that has to include the issue of financial sustainability of the running of the schools. And you know, there's so much big structure that were established across the state, and the government of those respective states have repeatedly said that they don't have the finance to, they don't have the funds to finance the running of those schools. In my own state, we try to engage the House of Assembly to find a way of supporting the Almajiri education. And one of the reason why our effort with the State House of Assembly did not work was that some of the members of the House of Assembly objected to that effort, citing the fact that these Almajiri children are not from our state. And because they are not from our state, we cannot possibly use the funds from our state to finance it, So these are some of the factors that has not make the Sangaya school work, the Jonathan Sangaya school work. I mean, even the former governor of Adamawa State did mention that they don't have the funds to finance the schools, besides the children are not from their state. So this is one of the reasons why we strongly believe that we strongly support in a way the relocation of the children back to their original state. I mean, with this, we can clearly hold the state leaders and governors accountable, you know? So if we have these children within their state, then we can justify, if we see an Almajiri on the street, we can call Malam that, Malam, we have Almajiri in the street, but you have made commitment that you're gonna take them off the street, you know? But if they're in another state, those governors are not responsive because they are not from their state, and we have seen that, you know? So we believe that if they are back within the original community, the issue of accountability, holding those leaders accountable would be very strong for us and even for the local community. And there will be greater level of cooperation even between the citizens, the community, you know, in finding a way to support them. So on the issue of the schools were built, but they are not functional because of the issue of financial sustainability of the school.
Right.
Yes.
Right, thank you so much. I hear you talk about resource, but I think beyond resource is also the political will, and I think a philosophical underpinning of how and why Al-Majiranchi is what it is. I think maybe a behavioral insight is required, and that is what I hear this conversation bringing in today, so that people don't just step out to say, build a structure, that solves it. There are social structures that we need to keep in view, and I can see comments here around what's the role of parents. We need to bring in parents. We need to talk about caregivers. They all have a role to play here. But I want to return to Peter because there's a specific question for you, Peter, in your context as UNICEF. And it's the concern that today we've talked about livelihood, we have talked about education, we've talked about safety, but there's another dimension of safety that has not been touched on, and that is the psychosocial care for these children, boys and girls, because I insist in bringing the fact that there are girls amongst them back into the room. And the question is being asked, what is UNICEF thinking to do beyond the COVID-19 experience? In other words, what is UNICEF learning from this period in terms of how you think you might want to engage with religious bodies to stop the exploitation of children by, quote unquote, the person said, non-God-fearing clerics. So the psychosocial care, as well as engaging religious leaders to create awareness, to increase sensitization, and to demand that there is some shift in mindset. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Amina. Now, I want to say at the outset, the importance of religious education in Nigeria is part and parcel of the culture, and we must continue to encourage that and allow that to evolve. But it needs to be complemented by other learning experiences that allow a child to develop and be able to aspire in a very different way. The second, and this touches on your psychosocial thing, we must involve the children themselves in this debate. Their participation, past and present Almajiri children, need to be part and parcel of informing us of how to move forward, what their challenges were, what their experiences were, what were the strengths and the weaknesses of the system that they have been through, so that we can be informed for the future. And then you talked about the psychosocial impact, and that's where we have a better understanding of where are the strengths and the weaknesses, what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. We have a lot of work that is looking at psychosocial care for children, mainly in the North and East, but it needs to expand across, helping teachers themselves to understand better the psychosocial nature of how children are responding to the environment around them and the different environment around them. But the key for children is the routine, is a routine to be able to wake up, go to school in the morning, come back for whatever it is at midday, and then go for, if it is available, for religious teaching in the afternoon, is critical to help a child's psychosocial balance and going forward. Once that routine is taken away, as indeed it has at the moment with schools closing and children being stuck at home, their psychosocial strengths will diminish. And we must help them going forward, and we must help the teachers going forward to be able to accommodate the different types of trauma or stress that children have been through, whether it's at a specific area of education or learning or institution, or whether it's the mere fact that their routine has changed dramatically and the compass that they had has been taken away from them and it needs to now be reestablished.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, Peter. And I'll return to that point in the summation as much as possible. But I need to return to Malam Nasir because Malam has like 3-4 questions before him. And Malam, there's a conspiracy theory to kick you off as well. So I just saw a comment float across the screen now to say that the term abolish Al-Majiranchi is actually Western imposed. And it's a way to get resources of the West. It's a precondition to get resources of the West. It's not something that Northern governors are thinking about. It's not something that's coming from you. And so they want you to say more about that. But please remember, we wanted you to talk about the budget that you are committing to this great task. We wanted you to talk about other children who are not necessarily under the Al-Majiranchi system, but they're also vulnerable because we're talking about universal education. And if there's a difference between the difference on the ban in Al-Majiranchi and ban on bara like street begging, in other words. Over to you,
sir. Thank you, Amina. First, let me put it on the table very, very loud and clear. We have never had any pressure from any bilateral or multilateral organization to prohibit Al-Majiranchi. Okay, in fact, what we have had, as I explained earlier, is funding from the World Bank under the BESDA program, funding from Islamic Development Bank under the bilingual program, as well as support from DFID, UNICEF, UNDP, to try to tinker with the Almajiri system, to try to integrate it and have some kind of injection of numeracy and literacy and skills to the Almajiri system. The problem with that is that Almajiris are not classified into classes. So, you know, when you go to an Almajiri school, there is no class 1, class 2, class 3. They are all together. They all just memorize the Quran, write the Quran and memorize it. They range in age from 4 years to 16, 17 years. So really, it is very, very difficult to impart. There are different stages of their intellectual development. It is very, very difficult to impart numeracy and literacy skills to such a diverse group with different ages and different understanding. But we've never been under any pressure. So any thought that this is a Western conspiracy or a foreign conspiracy to abolish Al-Majiranchi, you know, is not true. It is our decision as Northern governors, based on the reality of what we are facing, that this Al-Majiranchi has not served our region well. It has not served the country well. In fact, it has become a potential danger to the rest of the country. And this is why we took the decision to abolish it. People would not believe this, but it is a fact. And let me also say, since we started this program, there is no northern state that has received a penny by way of financial support to implement the repatriation, the rehabilitation, and settlement program. We have done it all from our own resources, and we are very happy to do it. So I want to clear that misconception, because Nigerians like to create conspiracies out of nothing. There is nothing of the sort. I know that we worked with UNICEF, but UNICEF has experience in documentation, in tracing, and so on. We worked with UNICEF to help us ensure that these children are properly documented and they are properly traced to their parents so that we can monitor and ensure that they go to school when schools reopen. That is the role that UNICEF is playing. UNICEF is not giving us money. UNICEF is not telling us what to do. They just came in to help us implement what we have decided to do. So I want to make that very clear. Now, a lot has been said about sustainability. It is true legislation alone, policy making, pronouncements by governors, even enacting laws and so on, will not make this to be sustainable, because I'm here for another 3 years if God spares my life. I don't know who will succeed me. I don't know what attitude he will have. However, what I know for sure is that during the 3 years that I will be governor of Kaduna State, by the grace of God, we are going to ensure that we completely entrench a new system of education that gives everyone the opportunity to have modern education in addition to Quranic or Islamic education. We will have that system by the grace of God in Kaduna State. We need community buy-in, and this is why, as I explained earlier, we'll do a lot of advocacy. We'll go around, we'll work with NGOs, we'll work with people like Sheikh, Lemu, we'll work with local scholars here in Kaduna that we have been consulting. We didn't wake up and do this alone. We're in touch with senior scholars in Kaduna who also agree that this is the way to go. Okay, because this Al-Majiri phenomenon is limited to just a few Malams. A large majority of senior clerics don't have Al-Majiris at all. A large majority, the most senior clerics, the most knowledgeable clerics don't have Al-Majiris. In fact, the lowest level Malams that have these Al-Majiris. So we are working together to find a solution. Now, let me also be very blunt. At the bottom of this issue is an economic issue. Okay, as I explained, these Malams make a living off these Al-Majiris. Okay, whether they use them to read the Quran for someone that wants some special prayers, or they collect the 200 naira Wednesday allowance, it is an economic issue. And unless we find a way to open economic opportunities for these Malams, they will find other ways. We are trying to look at some of them, because we have a shortage of Arabic and Islamic religious knowledge teachers anyway. We are looking at some of them that we can integrate and offer jobs as teachers in our primary school system, in our secondary school system, those that are qualified. So not all of them are going to lose out completely. A few, of course, are unemployable because some of them just declared themselves Malam. They don't even have enough knowledge to teach anyone. We have to subject them to the test. But we intend to employ and integrate as many of them into the formal educational system and offer them permanent and pensionable employment, so that economic pressure is off, because it is at the bottom an economic opportunity. Secondly, we are not prohibiting the establishment of Quranic schools for those above the age of 18. So for instance, if a Malam wants to establish a Quranic school that will offer Quranic or other Islamic education to those above the age of 18, those that have finished primary and secondary school, we will, subject to certain conditions, we will license such a school, and he can use the students of those schools to do the reading of the Quran, to do the prayers for those that want it, and so on and so forth. So they can still continue to make money off those that are 18 years and above. But what we are very determined is that every child in Kaduna State from the age of 6 to the age of 18 must go to school, must go to formal, modern schools, side by side with any other kind of schooling. And what we used to do when we were children was that we go to these schools 3 to 6, and on Saturdays and Sundays, when we don't go to primary school, you know, we spent longer hours memorizing the Quran and being taught the remnants of Arabic and fiqh. And we think it's a sustainable system. We should go back to that system. And that's what we'll try to encourage in Kaduna State. So we are not going to have a situation in which the religious scholars will all totally lose out, both socially and economically. There is a lot of reference to out-of-school children. I think it's a misnomer, because these children are not really out of school. They are attending school. Islamic schools, Quranic schools, Al-Majiri schools are schools. The question is, what is the utility of these schools? Are they getting life skills? Are they getting education that prepares them for the 21st century? So that's what it is. I don't like referring to them as out-of-school children, because it means that it is only when you are in Western type schools that you are in school. So the numbers that are being touted, I think amount to a misnomer. They are in school, it's just that they are not the sort of school that will prepare them for the 21st century. Questions were asked about the Sangaya schools, Almajiri school that Jonathan administration built. Well, let me say that when I came in as governor, I tried to do an audit of what is the situation on that and what progress has been. I found that only 2 schools were built in the entire Kaduna state. Kaduna state has a population of some 10 million people. I don't know how many Almajiris we have. The last count we had was something like 600,000. Now, I don't know what 2 schools can do. We found that one was operating, one was empty. We were responsible for the feeding of the children in the school, and essentially what they do in that school is get a mix of both modern education and Quranic education in a boarding school, okay? And they are separated into classes 1, 2, 3, and so on. So it's a bit more organized than the Almajiri school in the home of one Malam. But, you know, we felt that, you know, all schools should be like that anyway. You should have, you know, modern education as well as Quranic education, and we move towards that. One of the schools that are not being used, we handed over to the military in Birnungwari because of the insecurity there. And it was observed correctly that one of the schools is so out of town that it will be a problem for many. And then there is the challenge of most of the Almajiris not being indigenous to a particular state, so it's difficult to politically justify the State House of Assembly appropriating money to look after children from another school. But I think we are past that, because as Northern governors, we've decided that everyone should take his own burden, everyone should take his own responsibility, but ensure that every child goes to school. So I hope that will be solved. And we also have problems with maintaining the name Almajiri schools, because we think going forward, it may even carry a stigma. You know, I proudly say I went to Barewa College. Now, I don't know whether 20 years from now, somebody will want to proudly say I went to an Almajiri school. I think it may carry a stigma. So we want all schools to be the same. We want all schools to offer the same curriculum without prejudice to some infusion of Quranic and Islamic education. Regarding Al-Majiranchi and Bara essentially means begging. I want to explain our policies towards Al-Majiranchi, begging, and Makarantun Allo, because there is a lot of confusion about this, and some are being used interchangeably, and they are all separate. Al-Majiranchi is a system in which parents outsource the upbringing of their children, the education of their children, the welfare of their children to a Malam without paying him anything. So ultimately, the children end up being beggars, living in unsanitary conditions, you know, at the mercy of society, so to say. That's what we want to prohibit. We want every parent to look after his child. He or she brought them to the world. They have a duty under our culture and our religion to look after their children until adulthood. Adulthood is 16 to 18, and we insist that every child must remain with his parents and go to the school nearest to his parents, day school, and get primary education, basic junior secondary school education, and then when they are about 15, we can take them to boarding school for the last 3 years of their secondary education. That is the plan in Kaduna State. We are prohibiting the Almajiri system that prevents a child from getting this 12 years of formal education. When the child returns home from school, he can go and have 3 hours of Quranic education every day, right, of the week, and Saturdays and Sundays. Okay, so that's the plan. Right. Bara is begging. We have a law prohibiting street begging and hawking, and we're going to enforce it very, very aggressively. This is across the state. It's not targeted at Almajiri or anyone. It's targeted at everyone, and we're going to enforce that aggressively. Makaranta Allo, on the other hand, is a school where people are taught to read and write the Quran on a slate, wash it, move from chapter to chapter until they write the complete Quran from beginning to end. We don't have a problem with that, so long as for children below the age of 18, it is an afternoon and weekend event, so that in the morning children can go to modern schools. 2, we have no problem with that, and we license schools that do that, providing they are targeted at people above the age of 18, who are presumably graduates of secondary school already, so there is no danger. Once you have that secondary education, you can go and be a Quranic Hafiz, you can go and memorize the Quran, you can be an Islamic scholar, but after your secondary education. This is our belief. And so that is Makaranta Allo. So we're not prohibiting Makaranta Allo, just saying that for those below 18 in the afternoon. For those above 18, we can, if you meet the conditions, we'll give you a license and you can teach pure Quranic recitation and Islamic education to those above the age of 18. And you can use them to be writing the writing on Allah for people to drink and pray for blessings and all the other things that Malams use for economic empowerment, but only if someone is above the age of 18. So that is our position. Finally, the orphans. We have sanitized the orphanage system in Kaduna State. We've established some government orphanages. We are supporting civil society organizations, private organizations to set up orphanages, meet certain conditions, get license, and even get government support. We will support via the budget monies to keep orphanages going, because those that don't have parents will have to have, you know, a pseudo family upbringing, and we think orphanages can provide that, and we support them very strongly, but they have to be licensed. They will not be centers for the trafficking of children, and we have had to close 1 or 2 that have been involved in trafficking of children, but our commissioner is up and doing in that. But we strongly support establishment of orphanages, particularly for established by private and civil society organizations. We actually plan to give them budgetary support. Thank you.
Where's Dr. Amina? She's okay. Okay. Hello? It's Dr. Bas. Okay.
Hello, I am. Thank you so much, Malam Nasir. I think it's always in my character to keep to time, but I'm also conscious of the fact that we started 11 minutes late, and time is always of the essence. We always pay the price of wasting time. Our panelists were here in good time, but we had to wait for more people. Now we have about 605 people online. But permit me, dear panel, to invite one of our guest contributors today, someone who's very passionate about this issue, and she wanted to be here in person. We had introduced her in the morning, the Honorable Minister for Women Affairs, and standing in for her now because the Minister is the President, today being Children's Day in Nigeria. And we have here the Senior Special Assistant to the Minister, as well as the Director and the Minister of Women Affairs, my sister, Princess Juma Idonije, to share with us a few closing remarks by way of the summaries of what you have heard today and what you'd like to see us commit to. My sister Juma, over to you for 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, all. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon, good afternoon.
Okay, great. Your Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen who are all listening to us at this time, happy Children's Day. We're all once children. And so on behalf of the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs, I want to say happy Children's Day to all of us who are watching and who are listening on to these conversation. Very timely at this time. The Honorable Minister had come online earlier, but she had to quickly join the other virtual meeting going on in celebration of National Children's Day. So listening to all the remarks and all the comments, let me begin by, on behalf of the Honorable Minister, say a very big congratulations to the Kaduna State Governor. You're doing a marvelous job. And if all others can commit to what you're doing, I'm sure we'll have a Nigeria truly fit for children. Congratulations, sir. You are one of the he for she's that we're all singing about what you're doing. and we pray that you continue in this state even after you have left office. We pray that you have legislations all around the work you are doing. It's not just thinking out good policies, but we need legislations around these policies. So quickly going through what we have, the remarks and all the good comments that have been made, I want to quickly just summarize as follows. Some of these recommendations that we're trying to make at this juncture must involve the participation of children, families, malams, and community members to ensure ownership and sustainability of the solutions, address the current situation, as well as to mitigate any misconceptions and outcomes of inequities for each and every child, including Almajiri children. This forum I gathered was supposed to actually talk about only the Almajiri children, but in between I heard discussions about other children in the orphanages and other vulnerable children. So just going ahead, we'd like to say there's need to institutionalize a community-driven framework that ensures access to education for Almajiri children within the broader education strategies that ensure provision of free, quality, equitable, and non-discriminatory public education for all children. We also need to quickly facilitate community-based access to age-appropriate skills and vocational training alongside literacy classes. There's need to also enhance community-based mechanisms to identify and refer critical child protection issues to social services through statutory social welfare actors as part of the broader child protection systems in the country. We also need to quickly institutionalize effective state policies and regulatory frameworks to support the reform of the Almajiri system in accordance with child rights standards. We should also look at establishing and implementing a framework for conditional cash transfers to support parents of returned Almajiri children and other vulnerable children and families within their communities. There is a need to also rethink educational system to be more indigenous mother tongue focused. Let me quickly cite an example here. I grew up in Kaduna State and I attended the Catholic school in Kaduna in the early 70s. And when we were in primaries 1 and 2, Hausa language was the mother tongue for which we were trained. And then going on to primary 3, there was the introduction of English language across board, meaning that by the time you are grounded in that mother tongue education, every other thing becomes secondary. You understand what you are supposed to be doing. So running quickly, my final word here is intensify advocacy to ensure that all states yet to domesticate the Child Rights Act do so. Right now we have 24 states that have domesticated the Child Rights Act. We have 10 states, especially from the north, that are yet to domesticate the Child Rights Act. Let me quickly also congratulate Kaduna State for taking the lead in the north for domesticating the Child Rights Act. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs, we say thank you for having us on this discussion. Thank you.
Many thanks indeed, my sister Jumai. Our kind regards to the Honorable Minister. And I think we all hear you loud and clear, especially your last point about domesticating the Child Rights Act. Beyond domestication, implementing and evaluating the Child Rights Act, I think is what we've been talking about today. Looking at this all important issue from the perspective of universal basic education, but also dignity, healthcare, livelihood, the entire political economy of it. And it's been such an amazing and rich conversation. We have just 4 more minutes to get out of here because I did say I was only going to take the extra 11 when we started late, and I have to keep my word. Ms. Esme Stott of the European Union joined us as a development partner and critical friend, and we thank you, ma'am, for making it in today. There's been a huge, huge, huge sea of words in the chat box, in the Q&A, Facebook, and Twitter. And my request to the back end team, Malam Nasir and Sheikh Lemu. Oh, excellent. So, Honorable Minister, let's say hello. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. This is what Malam Nasir meant when he said that you give women the space and there is progress. My sister Juma has been an excellent ambassador. She's represented you very well, Honorable Minister. All that is left is for us to thank you and to say that some of the commitments she has made, like ensuring that the Child Rights Act is domesticated, is something that you take forward, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. And so what we're suggesting is that the UNICEF team and the back end should help collate the questions and the comments today. Very rich participation, including literature that's been shared. I shared my email address so some people could share the links or share the literature. Your reputation precedes each one of you as avid readers and thinkers. So I'm sure when you get this thought, you know exactly what to do with them. Sheikh Nurudeen, somebody said, can you say hello to Sheikh Ahmed Lemu, my Malam? That's a special message to you to send to Grandpa. Exactly.
My regards.
Absolutely. I would like
I'm excited to see you. Your Excellency, Governor of KB, Peter Hawkins. I'm glad to see you. Happy Children's Day to all of you. And please, please, our governors, keep doing the good work and ensure that you keep our children safe.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. We want today to be a Happy Children's Day every day for every child.
Yes,
and that's why we're here.
Online celebrating with the Nigerian children. We've just wrapped it up. I was with the representative of the president and I couldn't leave. That was why.
It's all right, ma'am. You're right. It was national service elsewhere. We made your apologies. I have just 1 minute to go. And I want to use that 1 minute to thank most profusely the team behind the scenes. A lot of the time, we don't remember that there are people who are burning the midnight oil. I was so very happy when Malam Nasir mentioned my sister, Haji Hafsat Baba Mohammed, for the great work that she's doing as commissioner in Kaduna State. And for this particular conversation, we have had a fantastic team. Fidelia, Tosin, Abubakar, Inkiru, Willie, Hadi, and my dear sister, Milen Kidani. Milen, I wanted you to show your face at the close. Remember, we had a deal. All UNICEF team that have been doing fantastic work. And as I thank my panelists, Peter, you must be proud. Fantastic team. We have had a few good hours of rehearsals across 5 days. We had no Salah holiday, and you can see that it has paid off. So excellent ambassadors you have. And to close by thanking my daughter, who when I said, His Excellency is on the line, she said, who? Malam Nasir? I said, yes, Uncle Nasir. Oh, she said, Uncle Nasir. I said, yes, Malam Nasir. And to remind us that it's not about His Excellency, it's about that person who's showing leadership. Farida, thank you for being my timekeeper today. Thank you so very much, everyone. Remember, we cannot pass the buck. The responsibility is our collective one. Let all of us push away and chip at the barriers and commit, take the eye of responsibility and commit to make every day Children's Day for every Nigerian child. Thank you very much for this afternoon's conversation and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
well done, Amina.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Malam, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you for
everybody.
inviting
Thank you,
us.
Mohammed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Honorable
Peter.
Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for joining.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Mohammed,
you,
well
Thank
done.
you so
Keep
much,
up the
everyone.
good work.
Thank you, Excellency.
Well
Thank you,
done,
Excellency.
Inshallah,
Amina.
I get the Sheikh, but Lemu, I get Sheikh.
Inshallah, sir. Zaidi.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
You are looking so
Thank
fresh,
you
my
all.
brother.
Okay, yeah, yes, Milan.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Milen. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Milan,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Yeah.
Bye. We're going to sign out now and leave. Bye-bye and stop the recording.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheikh.
Well done, Mohammed. Well done,
All right.
Nurudeen.
Ah,
The
Milan.
debrief starts now.
All right.
Honorable Minister, well done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Yes, I'm so sorry. There's too many things going on, but I'm so glad you came just in time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Love you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Yes.
Great. Great.
Ooh, alhamdulillah.
That's good. Let me quickly show my face too.
Bye.
Thank you, Hadi. Hadi, thank you very much. Abubakar, everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you, MSK.
Yeah.
Our great coordinator.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Everything went well. It was
Yeah,
great.
we thank God for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Moderator was just excellent.
God, thank God, thank God.
Moderator was excellent.
Thank God.
Right.